Hey, this is Noah. So, let's talk about something that isn't Sega. So I'm gonna start this video in a way that might make some people just click off the video if you're watching this and you're part of the, that crowd. I am a founder of Google Stadia. I have enjoyed this service for as long as I've used it. I think it's unfortunate that people sort of write it off without trying it, you know. And just for the record, for the people that want to tout that it doesn't work, I don't even have an internet connection that can actively stream 1080p at all times. I live in a house with a number of people who are all using the internet, and it's just not easy. Now, given that context, I usually stream it only at 720p. Literally the lowest settings that it can offer, and I still enjoy my time with it. It works. Most of the time. When it doesn't, it's fine. It's not a big deal. A lot of people had been worried that when xCloud over on Microsoft's side of things came out, that it would be the Stadia killer or whatever. Ironically, from people that I've heard talk about it, most of the people who could use xCloud, like with Game Pass, they don't really care for it. Realize that with Game Pass, that's the main focus. xCloud is just a facet of it. It is a bonus. It is an additional feature that you can choose to use, but you don't have to. It is not necessarily the main point, and I think that idea, I'm struggling to find the words, I think that really resonates through how people are using it, because most of the people I've heard who even have Game Pass, they don't really care about being able to play their games on their phone. And in that regard, I sort of sympathize with that, because even when I use Google Stadia, I'm usually using it on the Chromecast on my TV. Not even necessarily on my phone. Most of the time if I'm using it on my phone, it's low-key because I'm trying to like flex at work that like I can play Doom Eternal on the go and it still looks good or something. Although I will say there was one time I was in Best Buy and they apparently have good internet. So when I was waiting for my dad to get done doing whatever business he was doing, I started playing Rise of the Tomb Raider on my phone. It worked. It was nice. I'm all for the whole cloud streaming thing. I think it's fine. I tried GeForce Now. You know, I didn't stay sub to it, but that was mostly because they kept removing games that I was interested in. I ended up playing Endless Space 2 like while I was in bed. That was really cool. And I did try xCloud when it was in its beta. I didn't end up staying sub to it. I didn't say. I don't think I even stayed subbed. My God, I am having a stroke. I tried xCloud when it was in its beta. I actually went to the effort to sign up for it. And I even had tried Game Pass before they had integrated both. For the, like, you know, like how I had like the $1 for like a month thing? Yeah, I did that. And I played 2 games. 2 games. I think before I get into what I'm going to be talking about with Amazon here, that is an innate issue with this model. Because I want you to consider the following, right? So, streaming services like Netflix, xCloud, and what will be this Amazon one, they sell this idea of like, look at how many games you get, and you only have to pay this much per month. And the logic here is like, okay, if you value all the games out, literally, like if you take how much these games are, and then you check how much you have to pay per month to use the service, you go like, okay, so I have this amount of time before the value here gets devoided. And as long as the service keeps adding new stuff to it without necessarily retracting stuff, you're fine, right? GeForce Now and xCloud both share a bit of an issue where sometimes the games will be removed from it, right? There's also the sense of urgency that comes into play that I'm personally not a big fan of, where like I feel like I have to play these games that are sort of on my like backlog that I've wanted to try because I'm afraid that they're not going to be there. And I imagine it's also kind of doubly coupled on, that's not a phrase. It's compounded on, that's the word. It's compounded on because if people aren't playing those games, they're probably going to be the ones that get removed, right? So if I'm not playing it, and if everybody else is not playing, then it gets removed, but then I never get to play it. At least with Google Stadia, you know, so far, because of the way its model is positioned as a gaming platform akin to Xbox and PlayStation, where you still have to buy the games unless if you're subscribed and you get the free game. The games have not been removed. So it's sort of like, Is that worthy enough to stand as a platform on your own? I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. The point is that they're trying to incentivize you buying into their service because of how much is there. But then you have to ask yourself, how much of this am I actually going to use? I don't think anyone ever goes to Netflix and goes like, well, there's thousands of movies and TV shows here, but there's no way I'm going to watch all of these. So, like, nobody goes out of their way to do that. But, like, should we? I might be presenting like a really hot take here. I confess that I don't really know because I don't have this scripted. I didn't really think about this. I probably should have. Back onto it. Let's stop beating around the bush and get into what it is. So I had heard a little while ago that Amazon was going to be trying to enter the gaming industry with their own streaming platform. I had known that they were already publishing some games, most of which have been somewhat lukewarm, if not actually kind of bad. Crucible got some interesting press. They unveiled their project, I think it was yesterday, from where I'm recording, called Luna. And it's another streaming platform. But when you get into the specifics, it's actually kind of compelling, in spite of what I was just saying earlier about how the pricing model is a bit strange. So let's run down the list. So to begin with, $5.99 a month, and that is supposed to be their sort of like beta pricing. That's not going to be the final thing, but if you want to use that as an argument for if it's better than the alternatives, then go ahead and do your thing. So far they have like 100 games, which is still not as much as I believe xCloud, I think. Don't quote me on that. I think they got like 160 something. Maybe? Yeah. Something like that. And you can just play any of them. Don't necessarily have to buy them. I don't know if that's going to be an option. That is one thing that I'm curious about. Because, I think it would be interesting as if they did it that way. Because with Google Stadia, you have a large library of games that have been built up over time from getting the free stuff. But then you can still buy the games that aren't there. So if you're sitting there like, man, I really wish this game was included in this, you could still buy. Got a controller. And I think it's kind of cute, right? The Stadia controller is sort of like a weird hybrid of both the PlayStation and the Xbox controllers, with the lettered face buttons, but the PlayStation stick layout. Well, the Amazon Luna controller, it kind of looks a lot like the Stadia, or not Stadia, my god, the Switch Pro controller, in addition to having the button layout of the Xbox controller, and more specifically having the stick layout of the Switch and the Xbox. So it's like, specifically regarding the stick layout, it's like both, it is etched into time that competition will switch the layout of their control sticks, and I think that's fun. I just like that. I don't know, nerdy part of me. But looking at the list of games that they have, frankly speaking, many of them are, older games, most of them, but they are not bad games, right? People argue that Stadia doesn't have games. Well, at least Stadia so far has some major third-party titles. Yes, they're, games from a few years ago, but at least they're the sort of AAA titles that exist. Looking at this list, just off the top of my head, most of the games here are not that. They've got Resident Evil 7, Again, let me just... Not bad games. They're just not all the most recent games. As long as that is what we know we are arguing on, if we are having a strong discussion about the subject matter. So we got Resident Evil 7. Not a bad game. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Not a bad game. I think. I don't know yet. They got Watch Dogs Legion. Yeah, I think that's it. From looking at their advertising, those are the only ones I could find. Look at the list. This isn't 100 games that I've got confirmed here. But, yeah. One thing I did notice, and I'm going to Google this right quick. So they seem to have this weird thing called game channels. And I think it's like Hulu, where like Hulu you can add like expansions to your like roster of available shows and movies by subscribing to specific like channels. And the one that they seem to have coming up here is going to be Ubisoft. Is it Ubisoft or Ubisoft? I don't know. That's interesting to me. Because, like, if they did one of those for, like, Sega, I'd be up in that. I'm not sure how I feel about that in theory, because, with Hulu at least, when I was subscribed, I didn't much appreciate that, if I'm being honest. That I wouldn't get all of it for a single lump price, but, it's a different way of running it. Pretty much everything else about it is very much similar to Google Stadia. They even have, I think, the same internet speed requirements for 4K, 35 megabits per second. Is that megabits? I think it's megabits. And even the way the controller works actually is the same too, as far as I could tell. Google Stadia, if you don't already know, its controller is kind of interesting. The way it works is you pair it with your phone and then it like steals your Wi-Fi information. That's kind of a hard way of putting it. Let me reword that. It will recognize... It learns your Wi-Fi information from your phone once you pair it the first time. And then anytime you turn it on, it's connecting to your Wi-Fi. That's how you can use it regardless of whatever platform you're on in your house and whatever your Wi-Fi is. And all you have to do is you have to turn it on and punch in a 4-button code. After a few seconds, it'll be like, right, that one. And then you're good to go. The Amazon Luna controller seems to work off of a similar principle of, being on the Wi-Fi. And I appreciate that. Maybe it'd be too much to ask to suggest if the controllers could be interchanged for each other. Maybe that's pushing it. I don't think you can get a USB adapter for that. Although I suppose if it did work with USB, you'd be able to use it on Stadia because you can use like whatever USB controllers if you're playing on PC. And I guess it would work on the phone, too. If it worked as a USB controller for the phone. For the present moment, they seem to be doing a closed beta of some sort. Obviously, I tried to, request access. Hopefully, they'll allow me in. Hit me up, Amazon. I use your services to buy things. Kind of a big deal. But one thing I want to highlight that I think is why they might truly be competitive, and I mentioned it very briefly before, but I want to bring it full circle so you really think about this. So one of the biggest reasons why Google Stadia is often considered inferior is because of the supposed lack of games. And as an avid Google Stadia user, I can say with some certainty that there is not necessarily anything wrong with that. I think some people joke about it a little bit too much, saying there's 2 games and 8 people that use it, which is funny, but I hope that that's not what they actually think. There are quite a bit of games, and they get added fairly frequently. Not nearly as frequently as the other platforms where Steam gets them every day. But there's something to be said about quality over quantity, and then somebody will argue yeah, all your indie games, and it's just why you gotta be so mean about it? I'm not even denying it, you're not wrong, but it hurts. With that in mind, Google has actually gone to the effort to found some first-party studios to develop games. So, sort of my mind is while all these other streaming platforms are cropping up, I'm sort of waiting for Google to reveal some first-party game that's gonna really convince people yeah, do this. Because I think people keep forgetting that you don't actually have to be a paid subscriber to Google Stadia to use the service. You just have to buy a game, in theory. So if they came out with a major game that people are interested in, so long as you have the internet connection support, you just have to buy it. Make an account, buy the game, you're done. You don't even have to invest that much. I think people are forgetting that. Because there's something about that that's kind of that's pretty good. But with Amazon, at least, they've already got a publishing thing going on. You can go on their site and you can find games that they have published. They've already been around the block a little bit. They've already teased into it. And that was one of my issues with Google, where I'm maybe you should have had these studios made a few years ago. I realize that they've spent a lot of years trying to get the service up and running and get it to work. But because of this, we're having to wait for these big games that we want to be able to play on this platform. But with Amazon, again, they've already sort of started. They started doing that before the platform. So we might be able to see major first-party Amazon games titles on Luna much sooner than when we will see them on Stadia. And that could be very compelling. Now, obviously, that's ignoring the fact that most of what they've put out so far is kind of... It's the sort of thing, it's like, well, both of these companies obviously have the infrastructure to be able to support this streaming stuff. But both of them are not gaming companies yet. I don't know that they know exactly what is best to be trying to do for a game. I fear that that could end up being the future where when Google finally puts out that first major title, that'll be garbage. Google, since I know that you're listening and you're listening at all times, please do me a favor and most of the Stadia community. Get that first game. Don't rush it. Make it great and make it be the reason that people go, well, dang. Yeah, I've always liked Stadia. And same goes for you, Amazon. I love the idea of a healthy competition. I would never want Stadia to get thrown under the rug, as it usually does. If you can make a solid competition for Google to get them to actually step it up a little bit, I would appreciate that. This is Noah. That's Amazon Luna. Looking forward to ruining my Wi-Fi data again, or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like what the people who hate these platforms will say. Whatever. Have a good one.